All right, I'm Gary Simon, and in this lesson, we're going to begin going over some Photoshop fundamentals specific to UI design, which is user interface design. So the reason we're doing it specific to UI design is mainly because Photoshop is very powerful and very dynamic in terms of the type of projects and the type of things that you can do with it. So for us specifically in this course, since we're building an app and we're going to be designing an app using Photoshop, we're only going to cover the necessary aspects that pertain to UI design. All right. So basically in this lesson, we're going to focus on, the very first starting point whenever you're using any new software. How do you start or create a new document? So basically, as with any application, usually we just go to File, New, and we have the new dialog box here. Now there's some important things to understand about this dialog box. First, the name, very simple. Just put something that's relevant to the project you're working. Second, we have document type. Now document type, it differs depending on the version of Photoshop that you have. Now, the Adobe Photoshop CC 2015, which is what I'm using now, has something down here called Artboard. Now, if you have a previous version, it's not going to have Artboard. Artboard is a really handy thing, but all these other presets here basically just kind of change up these settings right here quickly for you, depending on what you need. So if you're missing some of these, don't worry. By default, we're just going to use custom for now. Okay, so then we have width and height, and we have this adjustable drop-down menu where we can specify the type of units. So right now, by default, we're just going to leave it on pixels. And if you were to use something else, say for example you have a print project for a poster or something, it may tell you the dimensions are however many inches by however many inches. And you would use this instead of pixels unless they give you the pixel count. All right, so width by height, very simple. Resolution, another very important thing to understand. 72 is the default resolution, and that's what you use if you're designing something that's simply for the web or displaying on electronic screens, basically. So 72 pixels per inch is pretty much standard. If you're doing something for print that's going to be printed like in a magazine or in a billboard, you're going to increase this size. So depending on the project, usually there's guidelines and documents based on what you need. But when it comes to designing for mobile apps, 72, leave that there. Color mode, also important. RGB. And we have other color modes down here. Once again, this kind of goes hand in hand with the resolution. 72 is what you would use for web and screen display, and RGB is what you use as well for web and screen display. Something like CMYK down here, that's used for print. All right, so just something that's kind of handy to know. Background contents, this simply means when you hit OK, it'll make the background whatever you want it to be. So right now it's white, or by default it's on white. So it'll always have one layer with a white background if you hit OK. You can specify the background color, which is whatever you have over here, or over here rather. And you could also have transparent, and that's what I always leave it at, is just transparent. It'll have one layer there, nothing's filled in. I could fill it in myself. All right, and then advanced, we don't have to worry about this. Okay, so mind you, we have this set on custom for document type. So I'm going to hit OK. You can use whatever dimensions you want, but basically this is all it is. When you're started with a new document here, one thing to pay attention to is the size, or how far you're zoomed in. If the document size based on the width by height pixel is less than the viewable portion here, it will be at 100% by default because you can fit it all in. If it's larger in terms of height or width, it will have it scaled down automatically so you can simply see the whole thing. The way you zoom in and out, of course, you use this zoom tool right here, and you can left click and drag, or you can right click and just specify 100% to see exactly what it looks like at 100%. And then you can always just right click and zoom out or drag and zoom out in and out as you wish. Now I'm going to go back real quick to File, New. I'm going to X out of there. And this time we're going to use Artboard. And so Artboard, once you specify this, it has a new option here called Artboard size, and it has a lot of different defaults that are pre-selected for you. You have iPhone 6 Plus, iPhone 6, iPhone 5, iPad Retina. You have all these different things to choose from. Android is 1080 by 1920. Let's just choose that. Leave all this other stuff the same, 72. Width by height, it already has that filled in, and then just hit OK. Now, right now, this is kind of a little bit difficult to see simply because the background over here is like this very light blue, and the artboard over here is just white. You may not be able to see it, but over here we have in our layers this artboard 1, and what's really cool about this is we can create multiple artboards, and this is particularly useful when we're working with something like an app design that has multiple screens, so we can see them all side by side. Now again, this requires Adobe Photoshop CC 2015 at least. So if you have something that's prior to this, the way you're going to have to approach our projects is you're going to have to go to File, New for every single screen that you have, and there's just going to be separate documents that are going to be tabbed up here. You won't be able to see them side by side really. It's not a big deal, but it makes things a little bit easier if you are able to utilize the Artboard feature. All right, so just to give you a little bit more rundown about working with artboards is if you come over here, we have in left click and hold down, we have an artboard tool. And this allows you to simply adjust the width by height. And it also gives you some other options up here as well. You can add a new artboard based on these dimensions. And all I have to do is just left click once and it adds it based on these dimensions up here. And now we can see we have Artboard 2. Now, if I just go back to here and hit Control Z to undo, we can also right click and duplicate artboard. Now it's showing up off the top of my screen so you can't see it, but at the almost at the very top you have duplicate artboard, and then you can name it once you clicked it and hit OK, and then it will take all of the layers that are inside of the Artboard 1 that you're duplicating and just replicate it to this copy that we just created. And of course, if we want to move it over, we could simply just real quickly, Artboard tool, select it, and move this over right here. All right, so that is basically how you create new documents and artboard documents in Photoshop. So in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the layers panel. All right, I'll see you then.